So what'd you think of that one, Antonio?
Pretty good, fun,
Yeah.
Pretty good fun.
intense, all the great emotions.
Yeah, I'm thinking back. So we just finished recording it. I love doing these intros because it's like we record it and we're kind of processing it as we're doing this intro. So you get to process with us and then watch it if you want. Um, but we went through so many different emotions. I mean, we talked about from music to stand-up comedy and art and I mean we were laughing and talked about obviously serious stuff and having cystic fibrosis and less than a year ago, right? Going through a double
Just
lung
over a year,
transplant, losing his brother and his cousin to CF as well. Just incredible just to go through so many different emotions. But it was just a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, just so we covered so much and connected on so many different things, and yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah. So Jose Navarette is our guest, and he's a real estate agent. It's how we first got connected with him. He works with Century 21 Showcase in Highland, Mike Stoffel. And he's an artist as well. And some people may know that I like shoes, and found out that he does custom Vans. And so he's doing a pair of custom Vans with our Create logo. So can't wait to get those. And then found out that, about his CF and the transplant. But when we met with him the first time and really dove into his conversation, it was such an inspiring conversation to see someone so young that has been through so much, and to have this incredible balance of having such a positive outlook, but being so realistic. Like, he's vulnerable and honest with his struggles, but at the same time so optimistic. I feel like a lot of times the people in those situations, they're almost just everything's great and I'm so optimistic, or they're just really negative. But it was just so inspiring to see somebody coming from such a real place with it, and at the end of the day still being positive.
Just very authentic.
Yeah. So hope you enjoy this podcast, Jose Navarrete. Check out his YouTube channel. It's a little bit long. We actually, this is our first podcast where we ran out our SD cards, ran out of memory, but fortunately, our ninja, Antonio, grabbed his camera. And so towards the end, grabbed his camera and started filming. But first half of it, we're talking about music and stand-up comedy, and it was a very fun conversation. Towards the end, we talk about CF and its transplant. It gets a little more serious. So hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we enjoyed having it.
This is the Create Podcast.
Ask me hard questions.
Yeah. Yeah, but thanks for coming out, man.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me, honestly. It's pretty cool. It's my first podcast.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
so exciting.
Yeah.
Mine too.
Is it?
No. It still feels like it, though.
It's so
It's-
funny because, we vlog, obviously.
Yeah.
And you think you get used to it, but, we haven't vlogged in such a while.
Yeah.
So even coming here and kind of like being in the camera again, it's like a little, like the first time. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So
Yeah,
that's cool.
it's like getting off a bike. I feel that way. Like, if we go a couple weeks without doing a photo shoot, I'm like, do I still remember how to do this?
Mhm.
Like, am I gonna do this? Am I gonna totally mess this up?
Yeah. No,
I
I
haven't totally messed one up in a long time. So.
I totally get that.
Is it like that with painting? Like, do you get into a groove?
You know what?
Can you-
I have a fast hand. Like, that's something that I've noticed that a lot of people, well, I'm not saying that they don't, but I can work pretty fast. But of course, like, if I get into like a groove, I can like really execute.
Okay.
But then there's times too where I drag, and I feel like I work better under pressure. Like, I very rarely do I start a shoe, like if I get a shoe order today, right, where I'll go buy the shoe, just to have the shoe, and I usually kind of start until maybe 2-3 days before like the deadline, and I think it's just that like sudden pressure
For sure.
where I feel like I work at my best because I know I need to execute and I need to deliver because, if I don't, then
Yeah.
I don't want to be that kind of painter. So I do get into this groove. Like just yesterday, I was painting up until like 4 a.m.
That's awesome.
And I have to turn them in today. So after this, I'll probably go pick up Abby and then go finish some like minor details. And I had those shoes for like almost 2 weeks.
Isn't that so funny?
Yeah.
I always say that like deadline is like the gasoline for my creative process.
I think it is for some people.
And yeah, well, because we have a deadline every month, so there's a certain amount of like expectation and consistency
Mhm.
with it. So yeah, I kind of like have a whole. So, but I do think that like that 2 week process that you've been sitting on the shoes is part of the creative process, though. I mean, I think that you're like conceptualizing and like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's all part of the
And a lot of it has
process.
to do too with like, people give me free reign, like that's great. But at the same time, I want to make it like as personal to you. So
Yeah.
during that 2 week, I'm kind of like going back and forth with the person, like, hey, so what is your name? Like, what is your favorite number? Just random stuff that like I can apply to it. But I'm also a very, what's that word? That people, like when you don't do something? Procrastination. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my best friends, like, I don't know, probably 20 years ago, we worked together. I had a children's photography business, and she dubbed me the perfectionist procrastinator, which I'm like, that's true.
You know what?
Because I like need it to be done right, and I'm not going to do it until I can do it right, and then,
No, I feel the
there
same
I
way.
am at 4 a.m.
Yeah,
getting
because
it
I can
done.
work, with certain time in advance, and I still think I work pretty well, but I think it's just this like sudden rush,
Yeah.
of like I'll just put it away, I'll just put it aside, and eventually I'll get to it. And you always hate that moment where you're like, oh damn, I have to turn this in tomorrow or in 2 days, and like you're scrapping for what's the approach or whatever plan I had. Let me try to figure it out, and so, but it always turns out good. So
It always turns out.
I think it's just my way.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that the more that you do it, especially something like what you're doing with the shoes, I can see where it's like there's an element where it's a like somewhat of a consistent process, where you're like, I know the steps that need to happen and I know approximately how long each of those steps are going to take me. So like, this is how far I can push the envelope.
You know what it
and
is
still get it
too?
done.
When I first started, just like when you start any like brand new business or like side hustle, you feel like you have to, I'm not going to say like portray, but you have to deliver, in this certain period to kind of set yourself, a reputation or like, oh, he's reliable. And,
Yeah.
but once, I'm a few months in and now I'm very comfortable saying like, hey, unless you need it suddenly, within like the next few days, I do have an order or 2 orders or, I'll get to it when I can.
Right.
And I have yet to have someone who's like, complaining,
Right.
it's like, hey, just take your time. So like I said, I'm more comfortable now doing what I'm doing where I'm not too hard on myself too. It's
Yeah.
like I said,
It's so good.
yeah.
There's something I think with that like confidence that comes,
Mhm.
especially like as a procrastinator, and this probably isn't necessarily a great thing, but as a, lifelong perfectionist procrastinator, like I think that you like learn where your limits are too,
Yeah.
and you're like, I'm okay, I can get it done.
Mhm.
It's gonna get done.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the only thing where I don't procrastinate is real estate, just because
Right.
I have no
right.
choice.
Well, and if
That's a
you
different beast.
procrastinate
Yeah,
on
it's
that,
a different
it's
whole
gone.
ball game. Yeah,
Somebody's moving on to
Yeah.
the next
legal issues.
the next
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
I'm always fascinated by artists that have a quick canvas really fast because like I'm not an artist by any means. I can draw stuff but it takes me forever. So like David Cho?
Yeah.
He's the graffiti artist.
Yeah.
He did like a bunch of the Facebook stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever watched him like what he
I have-
especially with spray paint?
No.
It's fast.
Oh, you should. I think you would really enjoy.
I,
it.
pro- I
He's
probably would
fascinating.
definitely.
Because
Yeah.
he was hired by Mark Zuckerberg and what's the guy's name that was running Napster when he was working with Facebook?
Oh yeah.
If you've seen the movie, Sean
Good
Parker.
job. Good job, Antonio.
So basically, Sean Parker, who started Napster, was working with Zuckerberg in the early days of Facebook, and he went and hired David Cho, who was at that time a pretty well-known graffiti artist in LA, to just do all these murals inside Facebook.
That's so cool, man.
And I think it took him like 6 months, and they were going to pay him like $60,000 for it, and he asked for stock instead. And then fast forward like 5-6 years, his stock is worth $500 million.
That's insane.
It's great, cool story, cool guy.
Smart man too.
Yeah, but when you watch him, like there's videos of him doing the murals inside Facebook, and he's just so fast, and he's just like, you could tell he just like looks at it, finds the inspiration. You could tell a lot of times he has no idea what he's gonna do
Yeah.
right before it, and he just like, so I'm amazed by artists like that.
And I find it that, that's usually when you do your best, because even if I know what I'm going to do, there's still the part where you have to figure out the proportion. Is it going to,
right.
Look visually
How's it all gonna
appealing
fit
and all these
together?
things. And so, no, I get it. You know what's so funny that you mentioned that? One of like my goals, especially I guess you could say I'm considered an artist, right?
Yes.
is working on like murals, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think that's like a whole different like ball game.
Well, especially when you're thinking about like the proportion
Yeah.
of, I can imagine that like taking the difference between a shoe to a wall, like,
No, it's epic.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I hope, honestly, that like as I progress with my shoes and they become even more intricate and people start to, you know, because I still have yet to like fully show what I'm capable of, you know?
Yeah.
Because at the end, it is request. So if you tell me this is what you want, like I'm going to execute.
Right.
You know, but I have yet to have someone who's like, hey, I want this like really, really dope design, you know, because I feel like I have to still show more of what I'm able to, you know.
Yeah.
And hopefully, like I said, in the future, someone sees like my page, something like that, and they're like, hey, you know, we want to commission you to do, you know, this little wall and start from there and just kind of see where it builds up.
Have you seen, what's the documentary? It's like LA something about.
LA Originals?
Yeah, LA Originals. Have you
No.
seen that? Oh, you should watch that too. That's amazing. It's about a photographer and then a tattoo artist.
Mr. Cartoon is
Mr.
the
Cartoon?
tattoo
He sounds
artist.
familiar.
He's done like, he
probably
did like all
seen stuff.
Eminem's tattoos. And
Oh, really?
like, anyone in hip hop that
Yeah.
got tattoos in the 90s,
Or
early
like
2000s,
rock.
he
Okay.
did their
I
tattoos.
think he did a lot of like the Blink 182 guys'
Mm-hmm.
tattoos, and but he's kind of that same way where he's just like brilliant, you know, like, and you can see like the process of how he just like starts doing it, and like you can like see it like
Yeah.
flowing.
Did you
out of
love
him.
that documentary too? It's LA Originals on Netflix.
Yeah, I love documentaries in general.
It's
you
so
know,
good.
so something like that I definitely have to check out.
Yeah.
Because I'm running out of stuff to see, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So
Aren't
probably
we all?
definitely.
Have
Let
you
me
seen that
let me know
meme?
after you watch it.
No, I will.
It's
I
so
will
good.
definitely go to it,
amazing.
and I'll probably
Yeah.
text you later on because I'm
Yeah.
very forgetful too. Like, yo, what's the name so I can look it up and
Yeah.
watch it.
It's awesome. Have you seen that meme that is like, so I finished Netflix.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what do we do now? But yeah, LA Originals is
It's a must see,
amazing. It's a must
must
see.
watch. There you go.
It's like so well done.
Yeah. So how did it start when you were a kid? Were you sketching, drawing all the time, or?
Yeah, you know, I don't know if I disclosed this when we first met, but like with CF, like you'll realize that a lot of CFers like have like some talent, you know, whether it be like artistic or, you know, photography. Just they're very good at something particular, and they usually tend to excel. And so I just started drawing, just, you know, as kids normally draw, you know, like the whole house with the picket fence and all that kind of stuff. And it just kind of progressed. And next thing you know, I'm doing, you know, like I didn't realize that like I won a competition in high school.
Wow.
You know, like I did a self-portrait. And I don't know if, I'm sure every person who's an artist can kind of like relate. You never think you're doing your best, so you'll just scrap it, like I'll start again. But then in someone's eyes, it's like, yo, this is so amazing.
Yeah.
And so our assignment was a self-portrait. And so I did it. And again, I didn't think it was, you know, great. So I was going to throw it because it's more like to get extra points, you know, extra credits.
Yeah.
And so my teacher somehow got a hold of it, submitted it to the state, you
That's
know.
awesome.
And so I won. My point is that like through the years, you know, I started to like develop this like passion for it. But I stopped too. You know, I'll pick up the pencil or the pens or whatever it is. I'll draw for a period. Then I just stop. And I kind of pick up on it years and years. And obviously through the course of the years as well, though, I realized like, hey, I'm actually,
Yeah.
you know, somewhat good. But from everyone's point of view, it's like, hey, you're really, really good. You
Yeah.
know, like I always said, you should become a tattoo artist. You should be maybe try to see if you can get commissioned for like murals. And you always kind of put it to the side, like, oh yeah, it's you know, I'll do it. You know, it's a hobby, but you never really realize that like you can actually get paid. I mean, you know, you can get paid, but
Yeah.
I guess my mind was on other stuff, you know. So to be here now and actually,
It feels so abstract to be able to get paid for something that you're so passionate
Mm-hmm.
about. I remember like so vividly, it's been almost exactly 20 years since the first time I got paid for taking someone's picture. And it just like completely blew my mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very cool, when you're able to like kind of cross that threshold,
yeah.
it's cool.
And it's so cheesy, but it's true. Like when you really enjoy doing what you're doing, the money's great. Don't get me wrong, and you always hope that you can make a living out of it. But at the end of the day, you know, I enjoy it. You know what I mean? So, And sometimes I enjoy it to default because, someone say, hey, I really want a pair of shoes, but I only have this much. I'm like, don't worry about it. Just, recommend me or something like that,
Yeah.
or post it. So, but again, I do it because I enjoy it. It's not so much because of the fact that, I'm making money. I mean, that's great, but it's not like,
Right. Critical. It's
yeah.
not the driving force.
Yeah. No,
behind
I'm
it.
probably a bad business person when it comes to like my painting.
I think that all artists are inherently bad
Yeah,
business
yeah.
people.
Just because and then I'm a softie too. Like I said, if someone really likes a shoe and they're like, hey, I won't get paid till this day, I'm like, don't worry about it. Just send me the money for the shoe, and then just kind of pay me when you can. And I'm sure as I progress and so forth, it probably won't be a good thing to do.
Well,
but
you'll get burned a couple times.
Yeah.
It's
It
like
happened
the
already.
live and learn.
Yeah.
Like you get burned, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that
yeah,
again.
no, I
We'll
did
move
already.
forward a
That's
little
why I
better.
changed the whole like business aspect. Because before it was like, hey, just tell me what you want. I'll go and buy the shoe, and then
Right.
because you don't know me, so I don't expect you to just hand over this money.
Yeah.
And like I said, it burned me. So it's
Yeah.
not like, hey, I need your deposit at least to buy the shoes, because otherwise, that transaction is not secured, and so
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to be out time. It's something else to be out
money.
money.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So were you mostly like when you were a kid sketching? Like, what was there a jump when you started using paint or acrylic, or like what was that process?
It was first pencil.
Pencil,
You
yeah.
just like your normal pencil sketchings and so forth. But I ended up liking paint, especially acrylic.
Yeah.
And so like through high school, it was mostly that I resorted to. Very rarely did I pick up a pencil, unless someone said, hey, can you just run a sketch?
Yeah.
But I just enjoy painting, For one, you can manipulate the colors, and you can really, you can start with a tone or here and there, and then by the end of the project, it's a completely different, color scheme. So I think it's just the creativity, like really is amplified when you deal with paint, for me. Just because, like I said, you can blend and manipulate the colors and create your own tones that really aren't part of the palette, but it works.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There's so many possibilities.
Oh,
like
yeah, man.
endless possibilities.
Yeah.
Versus with a pencil. Or,
Yeah, absolutely.
So did you take art classes in high school?
I did.
Cool.
But I did it because it was an elective.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I knew I could pass. And I mean, art's pretty
Yeah.
easy.
Listen, we're all about like finding things to
Yeah.
pass to
Yeah.
get out of high school.
Yeah.
So did they break it up into like different mediums? Or was it just like art one, we're going to do a mishmash of stuff?
No,
Art
you
two?
definitely go through, even though it's an elective, like you can't just go from, like I'll just say elective 2, whatever. You have to start at elective 1 and
Yeah.
like art 1. And then obviously if you pass 1, if your teacher like recommends you to go to art 2 and so forth. But I've been taking art since 6th grade,
That's
like
cool.
officially as far as
Yeah.
like classes. So, a lot of the stuff that it sounds pretty bad, but they're like basic skills,
Yeah.
I was already like beyond
Cool.
that. So it was pretty easy for me to, maybe even skip a certain, grade or whatever it is that you want to call it.
Yeah.
To just get into like the next phase
next.
because I think I was okay,
It's cool. You're like such a good testimonial for having art in school of why we should be doing, like I think it's as important as anything else
Yeah.
that we're teaching kids in school.
Yeah, I don't think people realize the importance of like just the creative mind,
Yeah.
But thanks to social media, like you've really seen this like big,
I know, it's so great.
just with photography,
Yeah.
painting, whatever it is, it's just really, really cool.
Everything. I know one of my friends posted this quote on her Instagram yesterday that was like, the beauty of Instagram is that everybody is a photographer, a chef, an artist, a florist, that I think that it's like brought so much creativity
Yeah.
to the forefront that was, because if you think about the difference between Instagram and Facebook, you're not, I post all the same stuff on Instagram that I do on Facebook because I have family members that are on Facebook but not Instagram. But I think most people aren't really using Facebook as a creative
No,
space.
I
But
agree.
Instagram is amazing, and TikTok for that matter, too. I think what TikTok is doing for Gen Z and creativity, like I don't think we've ever seen anything like it before. It's funny. We have our kids our oldest is turning 21 in October, and our youngest just turned 10. So we kind of like have these, you know, like
It's a
I think
decade.
our oldest, I think our oldest is technically a millennial. And then on, you know, on down. So they like were super into Vine when Vine was around, and they were super into Musical.ly when Musical.ly was around. So I feel like we've like watched the progression of
It's so funny you mentioned because I had forgot about those until just so that you mentioned it.
of how we got to TikTok.
Yeah,
But it's so great, like the creative muscles that those kids are building through the process of like, it's such like the perfect creative like process, because that's how I think all creatives start out, is emulating something.
Absolutely.
And so there's all the, you know, like whatever the current, you know, sound bite is or trend is that they're trying to replicate it. And then, you know, like we have one of ours who is like the most like creative human being that I think has ever lived. And like he was harnessing TikTok like at the very, very beginning, like, and he was doing things like videoing himself, like jumping out our window, and like he was roping the then 7-year-old in to film him.
and I think it also like breaks the status quo, because I mean, I remember like I was born in '93, so I'm not that far out, but
Yeah.
like you said, the difference from then to now is like enormous.
Huge.
But even then, growing up, like, you know, you're kind of like instilled, like you have to still go to school and, you know, make sure that you get like a decent job and, you know,
Right.
get married and so forth. And now with, you know, social media, Instagram, Facebook for that matter too, like every social media platform you can think of has allowed people to just kind of break, like I said, the status quo. And like, I mean, if college is for you, then good.
Right.
But you don't necessarily need to go to college to become a very like successful person.
Yeah. Which
you
I
know?
think is amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
you know?
I think it's inspiration. Like what's
Yeah.
so good about social media is that so many different art forms, and you look at an artist, which whatever their outlet is, it came from them being inspired, you know, by someone else, and like I see this person do that, like, wow, well, how can I take what I see or what I feel, and like, how can I express it?
Yeah.
So, which is really why the purpose of this podcast is to talk to creative people and
For sure.
to you know what inspired them. But that's, like I said, it's one of the things I love about social media is this, especially for younger kids, it gives them the opportunity to see people that look just like them, you know, their age, from their same background, and like, well, if that person can do that, then I could
I can
probably do
too.
this. Yeah.
And
Just
it's
to be
making,
inspired.
you know, like people, you know, even things that you at some point figure like, okay, well, I still have to get some basic, you know, education. Like you have editors now, filmmakers, you know, that just kind of come out through the social media world.
Yeah.
And it's like, and they're pretty good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's just cool to see. Like, just how people enjoy seeing my painting, you know?
Yeah.
I enjoy seeing even other painters, you know? I'm like, yo, these people are like really, really cool. Like, people think I'm cool or great. Like, these people are superb, you know? And so that's who I even aspire to be and like
Right.
look forward. So it's a pretty cool like chain, you know, that kind of just like follows through. So
Well, and it's
That's what it
so
should be.
much more exposure, you
Yeah.
know, like I think about when I was starting photography 20 years ago, I was going to Barnes and Noble and like getting a stack of books and sitting on the floor and like leafing through them. So different, you know, like we're living in a completely different
Yeah.
world where you can, you know, I have a ton of like up and coming photographers that I'm following on social media. It's amazing.
yeah,
Like to be able to have that degree of exposure to creative
absolutely.
work, like in the moment as it's happening, we're so lucky. It's amazing.
No, I definitely love it. You know, I think it sets a different precedent too for people, you know, in general, our generation, Gen Z, and the ones to come. And
Yeah.
and it makes me wonder, like, how are things going to be, you know, 10 years from now?
Right.
You know, how much more influence is social media going to provide, and what other careers is it going to create, or other platforms? You know, so we'll see.
I know our 10-year-old, since he was like 5, has been saying he wants to be a YouTuber when he grows up. Like, Thatcher, what are you going to be when you grow up? Firefighter, police officer, doctor, lawyer? No,
That's crazy.
he's going to be a YouTuber. And he probably will.
Yeah, I remember watching YouTube for funny videos or like hauntings, you know.
Right.
So I never even thought, like, even us, like, doing a whole vlog channel, and the fact that you can actually get, like, monetized and paid for it.
Yeah.
And, again, how you have some people who are, like, super, like, crazy rich. And I'm not saying that,
Yeah.
you know, but just again, the idea of people not only living the or make, you know, this is their job, but the kind of lifestyle that comes with it. Because I mean, the whole YouTuber thing, if that was frowned upon, you know, 5-10 years ago, it's definitely now the thing to be, because everyone wants to be a YouTuber.
Yeah.
You know, and so people have the chops to make it.
It's interesting. It's almost like we're going through, like, there's always like revolution before there's renaissance. And I feel like we're like in the revolution, and I can like see like the little bits of renaissance that are coming, you know, like you think about, you know, the original like American Revolution that, you know, people were fighting to kind of like break down the class system and allow people a little bit more freedom to move, to like make their own life and the American dream and all of that. And I'm so excited to see like where we're going to land.
No, I know.
After this like revolution that we're going through.
It's definitely
right
the
now.
modern Renaissance era.
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
exciting.
So we'll see.
Well,
We'll see.
yeah. Well, I feel like art too and creativity, more so than most other things, is a way to just bring down so many barriers and walls and things that divide us as people. You know, it's like politics and like there's all these other things that just seem to naturally create division, where creativity and art, it just like all those walls just kind of disappear, you know, because you don't have to be from a certain background or fit into a certain bubble or criteria to.
No.
So it's just that's one of the things I love about
No,
it.
I agree with you. Because, yeah, you're right. It's not even a matter of, you know, your social background or your class or who you represent. It's really just about the common factor, which is if you like photography, I like photography too. Your stuff is cool. Your stuff is cool. And it just kind of like goes through there, you know. There's really no bias. It's just, hey, we share this common passion, and let's just talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's such a great opportunity to find similarities in a world that historically has been focused on differences. It's cool.
Yeah, I feel like the arts, in terms of like just as a society and culture, people being unified and getting, you know, past all these things that divide us, I feel like the arts have been there for years. I mean, you could look back into the 50s and the 60s and 70s, and you have just music alone, you know, a lot of the arts, but even just music. And you can look at, you know, whether it's black artists or white artists, or just where society, like these cultures and these people were really divided, you know, in a terrible way. But then you had, you know, white people loving music that was done by black people and vice versa, where it seemed to just disappear when you're listening to the music. It's like,
you know what I also think is, you know, I feel like a lot of people have this like perception that, you know, politics and, you know, certain backgrounds like shape, you know, whether it be the century or the generations. But I feel like in reality, it's these creative people, you know, this artistic world. Because if you go to the 1500s, you know, from an art point of view, like the culture is so different in contrast to the 1600s.
Huge.
And so forth. And now when you talk about the 50s, like literally each generation is so different. And I think art, for the most part, is a fundamental like core to that. I mean, so, and it's funny when people sort of have a, you know, this perception of art too, like, oh, it's just painting, or it's just, you know, photography. It's like, no, it's beyond that. It really does shape, you know, how people perceive the world. It inspires, it makes people, you know, believe that aside from all these things that go on, like if you have a passion, whatever that may be, you can definitely follow through, and you can definitely invoke change in one way or shape or form, you know. Something as simple as, you know, drawing something, that drawing, that image, whatever it is going to make this person feel a certain way, you know, and then that feeling is then reciprocated and passed on and so forth. And I think that applies to everything, whether it be photography, painting, music.
Well, even like going into fashion, like if you know, there's different eras of time where you can like see the like quickness with which like taste and art and all of that is changing. Like I watched Downton Abbey a while ago when it was on, and you can see like, you know, they start out in this like almost very Victorian style of dress where it's, you know, very like corseted and, you know, over just like a, you know, one person's lifetime
Right.
of that, the style and fashion has like completely changed to where they're, like the women have their hair like in a bob and they're dressed like flappers. And so I think it's interesting that there's so many facets of life that like art like bubbles
Yeah,
out
absolutely.
of, and you can see the time periods where it's like really changing quickly.
Or even how, in the current present time, what may seem like such an abstract in a sense, or like, oh, this is not even nothing different. 10, 20 years later, it becomes like the new thing. Like, when you think of like Picasso, I'm sure people in that time didn't really appreciate his art.
Right.
And now you have people who pay millions,
Right.
just for a piece. The same thing with Van Gogh. So I think it's just funny how things all kind of like fall back to, its original state, and the appreciation that kind of grows, through the time. So,
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when you have like a creative genius like that they aren't necessarily always appreciated in their time because they're like a couple generations ahead. And so when the, massive collective body of humans catches up to that person, then they're like,
this is a gem.
people are obsessed with
Yeah.
them and they've been dead for 50 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just interesting.
Well, it's interesting because we were talking about how with the arts seem to really go beyond and just eliminate, these divisions that exist in our society and they have for so long. And I wonder if it's because art is such an expression of who we are as a person, to our core. Like a true artist is expressing themselves. They're not expressing who they are on the outside or who they want to portray themselves to be. And because when we're able to do that in society, because it's the outward things that create all these divisions, right? So I wonder if it's because the arts are able to just eliminate that outward perception and that ego and fakeness and facade that we put up, and just so it's so much easier to connect with a person when you see who they are,
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
a person. So
Yeah.
I wonder if it's because the arts do that naturally that it just breaks down those walls.
Yeah. No, and I think art, it really is just art, Like there's nothing to it. It's your expression, and although it's yours, that expression is so relatable, which someone else, whether they're Black, Asian, whatever you want to call it, can also feel. And again, it's that common factor that brings people together, because like I said, it's not a matter of, black and white or, red or blue. It's just, this is so cool, and what does this speak to you, or what does this make you, think of, etc. And again, it drops down those barriers. Even if these two people have opposing ideals or perspectives, this one thing can really be the fundamental beginning or step into acknowledging, like, hey, we may see things, differently, or maybe not see eye to eye on some things, but this is something that we, definitely can relate to, and it opens the conversation, and I think it allows people to, again, kind of drop their guard and just appreciate, this that they see before them, so.
Because I think it's an expression of our humanity,
Yeah.
right? So whatever your art is, whatever your creativity is, you're creating a physical representation of who you are,
For
at
sure.
your essence and your own humanity. So when you see someone else do that, I think that's one of the reasons I've loved music so much for so long, is that I can find someone that loves this song or this album that I like, or this artist, and we may not have anything else in common, but I connect with that person, and it's like, okay, I can see you as a person,
Yeah,
versus
for sure.
You
the
find
clothing you're
somebody-
wearing or what's on the outside.
When you find somebody that loves Morrissey, you're like,
I was gonna ask you,
Friends.
who do you like as far as music? Like, what are
he likes all of it
So my
except country.
same?
my top three probably like singer songwriters, musicians are behind you on the wall. So Kurt Cobain, Nirvana, Morrissey, and the Smiths, and then Bob Marley.
Yeah,
So those are probably three different genres.
for sure.
Those are probably
Definitely.
my favorite artists, I would say. And then if I had room for a fourth one, Connor Oberst from Bright Eyes
Okay.
would probably be the fourth.
I'll be honest. I said okay, like as if I know,
Yeah.
but I don't.
He's a newer.
I know these
yeah.
three.
Yeah, he's.
Well, you started out. There were in the North Carolina office, it was a bigger wall, and there were 5. Who was the 5th?
There were 4. Connor Oberst was the
Okay,
fourth
was the
one.
4th.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he didn't make the cut for this.
What about bands?
Sad.
I mean, I know you talk about songwriters and so forth, but what about like bands? Like, do you?
I dabble in a lot. So like in one
They're,
genre,
like, all over the place.
I really love like The Cure, Depeche Mode, like that whole era.
Mhm.
I love, and then like Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Ziggy Marley, in that reggae world, I really love. And then when the emo craze, like there's some bands I still really like Taking Back Sunday and Thursday and
Dashboard
Further Seems
Confessional.
Forever, like that whole emo, like really like that stuff. So, but I'm kind of all over, so in different genres.
I kind of am too, I guess. I'm more of a soul kind of person,
Yeah.
so I like that funk,
Okay.
but then I also like disco,
Okay. Like who do you? What kind of stuff?
like I like Bee Gees, big
Oh,
Bee
yeah.
Gees fan.
They put out some great.
Yeah. They
music.
really did.
They really
You know,
did.
But then I also like Marvin Gaye, Al Green, The Temptations, so more of that like oldie vibe,
Yeah.
But then if we go contemporary, who do I like? Like I like Jason Mraz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's
I
a
like
great
Jason
songwriter.
Mraz. Yeah.
Super.
And then
talented.
of course, I'm a big rap fan, so like Tupac and
Yeah.
Wu Tang and so forth.
Yep.
So it's funny though because, I think even when it comes to like when you see somebody, you kind of try to base this like perception of like, oh, he probably likes this sort of like music, or that's
Right.
his style. But then you get to know the person, or a song plays and you're like, I did not expect you to like vibe to that song. you
Yeah.
know? So like when I am driving and I'm blasting, the audio, and I have, like I said, oldies, people turn around and they probably assume like it's gonna be like an older, fella, and
Yeah.
it's like this like young guy.
This old fella.
Yeah. So
Have
I'm
you
all over the
seen-
place too.
Have you seen Office Space? That movie?
No, I haven't.
Oh man.
You put that on your list too.
You need to
Okay.
put that on.
Great
We'll
movie.
we'll write
Yeah,
down
send me a
list
list.
of like next to view.
Then we'll update it every month.
Yeah. Okay.
We're like a little bit obsessed with movies, and like we really like finding great things to watch. But there's like an opening. Is it the opening scene in Office? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah. It's towards the beginning.
That it's
think
like this like super super nerdy white guy in his car, just like rocking out to rap, to like hardcore rap. It's like one of the best movie scenes ever. But yeah, that's kind of like
It's
where you
hilarious.
just like don't expect, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
Because
Very
I
cool.
like one day I might be in my car listening to like Depeche Mode or The Cure, and then the next day I might have like The Chronic in,
Right.
and listening to that, and I know every single word.
Mhm.
So I love '90s hip hop.
Yeah. Same.
From Snoop Dogg and Dre and Chronic. And
Yeah. The golden era.
Yeah, Beastie Boys. Love the Beastie Boys.
I never really got into them.
Yeah.
I mean, they have
Oh,
great
well,
records,
the
but
Beastie Boys documentary is another
It's a good
one
one?
that you need to add to
There's
your
another
list.
one.
It's
You know,
amazing.
That
Yeah.
was one of my first. I was fortunate because I had 2 uncles that were older than me, but so when I was in like 5th grade, they were like high school, so they were
Yeah,
still
they're, like,
young,
10 years older than you.
and they were really into music. And one was into like Metallica, Anthrax, like Megadeth, and like
Right.
that, just heavy metal from '80s heavy metal. And like Metallica's another one. Their old stuff I love, and Justice for All, just amazing. So he turned me into that, and then I had another uncle that was into like the Smiths and the Cure and Depeche Mode and all that stuff. That turned me into that. But I think my very first cassette I got was Van Halen,
okay.
which the first uncle was into Van Halen as well, and that was like Van Halen for a 5th grader. Like I wasn't ready for Metallica necessarily, so Van Halen was like my gateway
It
drug.
was a good
into
entry
metal.
point.
Yeah. But I loved Van Halen back then, David Lee Roth days. But someone in 5th grade gave me the Beastie Boys, their first licensed cassette tape, and I played that.
That changed it for you.
Yeah, that changed it for me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love the Beastie Boys.
What was do you remember like what was your first piece of music? Like, was it a CD?
Yeah, it was Elvis Presley.
Oh, nice.
Because I'm a big Elvis Presley fan.
Yeah.
That was
That's a
actually
good place to
through,
start.
through my dad. Because like I said, back then in the early '90s, CDs were pretty popular. And my dad had,
Yeah.
like I'm
I
sure most
still-
parents,
I still
yeah,
have some.
that little like corner thing, where
Yep.
you stack
Yes.
your CDs.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
And
about.
he was very particular too, like don't touch the CDs because then you'll scratch them and so forth. And then one day, he just pulled out an Elvis Presley. He was like, "Hey, listen to this," and I just got hooked, you know.
Yeah.
And it was through there that I realized, like, hey, I like this sort of like style of music, you know. And then from there, like Chicago and so forth, and it just started.
They have so many good
Yeah.
songs.
They have so many good
Yeah.
songs. Yeah,
There's a
I
good
listened
documentary
to
about
a
them
lot
too,
of
by the way.
Chicago as
Yeah.
a kid.
Yeah. And like I said, it just progressed through there. And believe it or not, like I liked rap growing up, but it wasn't necessarily something that I was like a fan of, because I kind of grew up liking Elvis Presley and that
Yeah.
sort of like vibe.
Yeah.
I think it was mostly once I got into like middle school that I started to like really appreciate rap.
Yeah.
You know, and like I said, from there it just progressed. Like I'm all over the place except country.
Yeah.
Like,
That's,
Yeah, me too.
That's
Yeah.
Mark's.
Like it's just one genre that I've tried. I really have, and I just can't. I like that Tennessee whiskey song. I don't know if that's what it's called, but I think
Johnny
it's-
Cash is the
Johnny
only-
Cash is another one. I'll be honest. Yeah,
I love Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
It's so yeah.
but he's a different sort of country.
He's
you know.
just like his own genre.
Yeah, it's a
kind of.
country rock and roll vibe.
Yeah.
Have you heard when he covered "Hurt," a Nine Inch Nails song?
No.
It's
Oh no, you're right. Yeah,
so
yeah.
good.
It's such
So
an
good.
emotional.
That's maybe like one
interpretation.
of my favorite.
Yeah,
It's
Johnny
so
Cash.
good.
yeah. Because
Yeah,
then he passed
so
away.
good.
What, like a few months later?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So
that's
good.
what made it even more like.
Yeah,
You
poignant.
know, yeah.
Elvis was he just oozed like cool. Like he was just from another planet.
He was.
Like who would you even like? Prince is a different, very different, but I would put kind of Prince in that category.
Yeah.
Or just like so unique. You know.
It's so funny because I never got into Prince, and he's a great musician. Like I'll give him that.
Yeah.
You know, there's certain artists as I've grown up, I've like I want to say like learned to appreciate, because it's not like I never had anything against them, but I'm like, oh, I can definitely like vibe to his music.
Yeah.
But I just never was a big Prince fan. I'm more of a Michael Jackson fan.
I was just gonna say we like have a running conversation, especially if you grew up in the '80s, that you either listen to Michael Jackson
Or
or
Prince.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Like
I
you
was-
can ask almost anyone,
Yeah.
and they'll answer pretty quickly. They don't even.
One
They
or
don't.
the
Have,
Yeah.
other.
And it's something they've never thought about before. But most people, if they were around in that era, or listen to it, like, and they'll know. So for me, it's. But I love Michael Jackson.
But you're Prince.
But I would go Prince. Yeah. Like Purple Rain. I remember I got that cassette tape in probably 6th grade, and the song "When Doves Cry."
It's
Such a good song.
a great song.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, and I totally grew up on Michael Jackson. Like I would have always said Michael Jackson, but you've completely converted me to Prince. Like
Yeah.
he is amazing.
I got to
He
go.
is.
I got to go to his his Graceland. It's called Paisley Park in Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
And there's like 4 music studios, and that's where he lived. It was his main residence, and you can go there like Graceland and like go on tours. And our son Ethan, I took him there 2 or 3 years ago.
Uh-huh.
So cool.
You know what's so crazy? That I mean, you know, he's passed on. You know,
Mhm.
rest his soul. But you know, time kind of passes through you, and I didn't realize it's been, you know,
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while.
it just seemed like it was just like,
yeah.
you know, recently.
Yeah.
Well, I think because he kept such a low profile.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you were seeing him all the time. That's how I feel that way about Robin Williams
Yeah.
too. That I'm like, oh, and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Those are the two like actors where I'm like, oh, they're never gonna make another movie.
No.
That's like so.
And it's always like you
Sad.
see like either like a scene or a snippet of something.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, they passed
Yeah,
on.
like I was looking at, I can't remember what it was. We were watching something and I was looking somebody up on IMDb and it like, you know, they had like different scenes and Philip Seymour Hoffman popped up and I was like, oh,
He was such a good actor.
Are you guys into
Good
comedy, by
actor.
the way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like stand up,
Yeah, like stand up.
big time.
Okay, cool.
yeah, Mark, like so much.
Yeah, I like one of the main things I consume on a regular basis is
It's
comedy or podcasts or
Yeah,
comedians that have podcasts too.
for sure.
I love, who do you
Who's your
like
favorite
or follow?
right now?
As far as like comedians,
Yeah.
You know who I like? Because I don't know what kind of comedy you guys are into, but I'm more into like the satire, but like the pretty like where people consider like that's like really horrific comedy.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
Like who?
He comes out. He's come out in a few roast. I can't think of his name, but he's a Caucasian guy. He's very Anthony something.
Jeselnik?
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
As
go.
far as like a like a modern day,
He's hilarious.
I think
yeah.
he's just so raunchy, but he's
Yeah.
so his timing and just
Yeah,
his ability to like just the way he constructs the jokes, it's like,
Yeah.
it's insane.
Yeah.
I love a funny person.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, I love a funny person.
Yeah, it's funny. I have, so for me, comedy started with Richard Pryor and Steve Martin when I was a kid. My favorite movie was The Toy.
The Toy.
With
I've never seen
Richard
it,
Pryor was
but
in
I've
it.
heard of it.
I probably rented it at the video store probably 30 or 40
You
times. My
still
mom
have
would,
an actual receipt.
I have a
of
receipt.
Do you?
renting the
from
toy.
like 1984 or something
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool, man.
that I still have. And my mom would just be like, do you want to get a different movie? But my parents were into comedy, so they would watch like some of Richard Pryor's stand up, and I would just be hiding around the corner watching
Right,
it, or
watching
Cheech
it.
and Chong, or George Carlin. They
Yeah,
would watch.
another one of my favorites.
So I mean, I'm going back to like third, fourth, fifth grade, and so that's where I really fell in love with comedy. But have you been to the Comedy Store in Hollywood?
No,
Right.
I have yet to even go to like an actual like comedy show.
Okay,
We
when it
we're
opens
gonna
back
go
up,
together.
we should go on a triple
Yeah.
date and go.
I
'cause
I really want so bad. The first time that I
It's so
actually
fun.
went to like a comedy show was when we went to a cruise.
Yeah.
You know, and that was like one of the entertainments. I don't know who he was. He was pretty good, but you know, he's not like a Ralphie May or you
Right.
know
Ralphie May
Anthony.
was so
Oh, man.
funny.
so funny.
I'll be honest. That's one person that I told Abby. I was like, I honestly wish, because I remember there was, at one point he was in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
in the infamous what do you call it?
Comedy Store,
No, the
The improv.
Laugh Factory.
the Laugh Factory.
The Laugh Factory. Yeah.
And you know, it wasn't super expensive, but I don't know what was the reason that I just, you know,
Yeah.
and then like he ended up passing away maybe like a year later, and I'm just like, oh. You know, so I definitely want to get back into, and I hope that after this whole COVID situation, that we can kind of like fall
Yeah.
back into
We'll
that.
take you. We'll go to the Comedy
Yeah.
Store. Comedy
Yeah.
Store is amazing because
It's so fun.
there's so much history there.
Yeah.
And so many comedians live in the LA area,
Mm-hmm.
so that's literally like their practice
Epic
field.
Center.
So like before things shut down, we went just a few times, and I mean, we saw from Chris D'Elia, we saw Joe Rogan, like
Another great one, to be honest.
Bobby Lee, like so many great comedians.
Dane Cook one
Dane
night.
Cook at the Comedy Store. Like we barely
What's
missed
the
Dave
guy-
Chappelle.
Oh,
one
man.
time.
What's
He just
the
showed up.
Murray Goldberg guy? What's his name? He was so
Oh,
funny.
I can't remember his name.
Can't remember his name, but
the
he
dad
was
from the Goldbergs.
so funny.
But yeah, the Comedy Store is just so great because you'll pay like $20-$25 for a ticket, and you
But
go
it's
on a
just experience.
You can go on a Tuesday night, and there's like 15 comedians.
Yeah, I was gonna say you see like 7 to 15 people.
And like at this point in my life too, I'm like yearning to just like do things for the experience, you know?
Right.
Like to say that, hey, I actually went to see this person, even if I wasn't up close, but just to be in that moment, you know?
Yeah.
Or to talk, you know, 20 years down the road, like, oh, I remember seeing this person, you know, in
Yeah.
their prime or whatever it is. Because like now when I, like, especially when I watch comedy, or I hear it through, you know, the podcast or just the app, you hear all these people laughing. I'm like, man, this is such a great, you know, tour that I so wished I was old enough to be a part of it, to go, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure these people can actually say, hey, I saw this person, whether it be Cat Williams or somebody like live, you know, even if I was
Yeah.
in the 100 seat,
Right.
you know, far back in the stadium, but just to be there. So that's really one of the reasons why now I'm like, I just want to go. For one, I love comedy,
Yeah.
you know, and the raunchier, the
Yeah.
the blatant just honesty, the better. But again, just the experience.
Have you
Yeah.
seen Bert Kreischer?
No,
Oh, he's so funny.
is he?
Yeah.
I
he's
think
hilarious.
he's like maybe my favorite of that like group of guys right now. His stories about his kids are like I laugh so hard. Like when we did the tape wall,
Right.
when we were like building it, we had like I think he has a Netflix. Was that what we were watching that night?
It had just come out. Yeah.
A Netflix
new
special.
special.
We'll add that to your list.
Okay.
He's so funny to like. I think that I find him like unnaturally funny.
Yeah.
He's
He's
just,
he's
like,
just one of those guys
so
that
funny, just so off the cuff.
he doesn't have to try.
He's
Like,
just-
Yeah.
and those are the comedians that are the best. Like when it's just so natural.
Yeah.
Where you could tell he could just be telling this story to his friends at his house, and he would probably be doing it the same way. He's
You know what
so
he reminds me
funny.
of now that you mentioned that? Mike Epps.
Yeah.
I think Mike Epps is another person who's
Yeah.
naturally just funny. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't have to try.
Like I think Mark like loves Bobby Lee. Like he wants to be his friend.
One day we'll be good friends.
Yeah, you'll be actual friends. But
I just think being around him, like you just don't know what you're gonna get
You
into, the
just don't know.
conversations.
Yeah.
You know, I see some of his interviews and like, he's not even trying to be funny, or he's
Which
not even.
one are you talking about?
Bobby Lee.
Probably,
Yeah.
Like some of the stuff that he says, it's so random, but it's just
You
so
just
hilarious.
don't know. Like he could be jumping on a couch in his underwear
Yeah.
in 2 seconds, and you just, like
He's so
he's crazy.
off the wall.
Have you ever
Yeah.
seen his brother, Steve Lee?
No.
Stevie Weeby. You're gonna
In
be
some
so
ways-
busy this weekend.
Yeah.
We're gonna have so many things
That's
for
good
you
because
to watch.
I'm actually gonna finish my show, so I need something to watch.
In some ways, Steve is
Funnier?
funnier than Bob. Like
Steve
Bobby,
is just like so pure.
yeah, he's not
just
even
so
trying.
pure of heart.
Yeah, he has a YouTube show called the Stevie Weeby Show,
Okay.
which I'm borderline obsessed with.
Maybe a little over the
I'll
bar.
have to check that one out too.
Yeah, he's
Another
just-
one added to the
and
list.
he's a little crazy. Like he believes in like reptilians and lizard people, like way into conspiracies. But
He's
it's
maybe
hilarious.
more than a little crazy. But he's so fun. He's so funny. Like you can totally tell that they're brothers.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of like similarities in their humor, but you've got like Steve who's like really not super trying to be funny.
just-
He just like is existing. And then you've got Bobby who every second is like, is this funny? Is this funny?
Yeah,
Am I being funny?
yeah.
Is this funny?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well,
they're
and actually,
very funny.
Steve Lee was in a band with David Cho, who we were talking about before, called Manchi. They're not together
Okay.
anymore. Very much Beastie Boys inspired type music that they did. But,
Who are you guys' favorite comedians, by the way? Like if you had to name your top 5.
probably Bobby Lee's my top one. Bert Kreischer's probably in there.
Yeah, Bert Kreischer is my right now. We like have historically loved Dane Cook.
Dane Cook.
Yeah,
Dane Cook has like some funny stuff.
Have you ever listened to his stuff? From,
Yeah.
like,
I don't get why
He kind of
Yeah.
like felt
there's so much heat on him, you know.
Yeah.
But I've watched his stand-up tours, and I just think he's naturally funny too.
He's naturally
like
funny.
his storytelling and
Yeah.
so forth. So I can't understand. Like there's some comedians who are like, yeah, they're not really as funny, but you get a few laughs here and there. But Dane Cook, he's just to me, he's really funny.
His
so I don't understand the heat.
His delivery
Yeah.
like is so great. Like 10 when did that one come out that we used to listen to all the time? It was like
Early
probably 15 years
2000s.
ago. Oh wow.
More than that. I think it
Like
was like
20 years ago.
2001, 2002.
But just like his delivery is so like he's talking about like there's a fire in his neighborhood and people coming out like without their it's not even like the story in itself is really in no way shape or form funny. But we like laughed so hard we were crying. Like his delivery
he's talking
is
about
so
the
funny.
shoe?
When he's like, yeah.
When like I think it was like there was a loud car accident.
Or was it
there-
a fire? There was some sort of catastrophe.
So everybody like ran out to the streets, and he's talking about how they like meet out in the streets, and he's like, everybody was talking about what were you doing with her? It's like I was washing a dish.
It's like not funny, but it's like so funny.
Again, it's just the delivery.
yeah,
it's all his
so-
delivery.
And he's
like,
influenced a lot of comedians because Dane Cook is very like hands-on, like
Yeah.
his whole body
very
kind of
Very
like moves with the
physical
joke.
comedian. Yeah.
And if you see a lot of like comedians, post Dane Cook,
Yeah.
are have adopted that sort of
Yeah.
like stage performance. Like I said, I don't understand why he gets so much heat.
I
He's
think-
like lost a little bit of his luster in the
well,
process.
he forced himself. I heard an interview with him where, in his more like the recent era that he's in right now, stand up, he went through like I don't know how long it was, but a certain amount of time where he forced himself to stand in the same spot.
Yeah.
Because like he was so animated, he was like, I'm gonna see if I can still be funny
Right.
and do my comedy. So
Standing
he
in
like forced
spot.
himself to not move during the whole set. But I think he got a lot of shit because, I mean, he rose so fast.
yeah.
And like he was literally there was
Movies.
no one even close to him in
Yeah,
comedy
we saw
at
him
the time.
we watched Dan in Real Life the other night. He's great in that.
And I think there's always going to be some jealousy, by your
It comes to the
competitors,
territory.
especially when someone rises that fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think another part of it was, I think because he was so animated, I think a lot of other comedians I could guessing at the time, almost like he was a try-hard.
Yeah,
It's like
I can see
kind of
that.
mentality.
I can see that, but then again, like I feel like that's also just his personality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can see how some people may take that as like, oh yeah, you're trying too hard. But like I said, I think he's a great comedian. Not my
He's-
favorite, like not my top,
Yeah.
but I still think he's like
He's great.
He's
a
Yeah.
great
super
one.
talented.
Yeah.
Dan in Real Life, you seen that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, with
And
Steve
that's
Carell.
so
and
great.
David
We watched that not last night, but the night before.
Yeah,
it's
it's
like
great.
in our
It's in our rotation.
yeah. We have a couple movies that we like watch at least once a year.
Do you have a favorite movie?
You know what? I'm actually into like that whole mafia genre.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's usually
Godfather.
like Godfather, obviously Casino, Goodfellas, The Bronx Tale, Scarface, like that sort of genre, like
Yeah.
just the mafia
You're
itself.
just like an old soul.
Yeah, I get that a lot, and I truly do believe that.
Yeah.
You know,
Cool.
and like I said, not because I'm into the whole violence aspect. I mean, that's just obviously cinema, but just again, there's this like fairy tale to just the whole ambience of mafia and
Yeah.
Yeah.
the fact that was like a real thing, you know, and like a part of you, as naive as it may sound, it's like, you know, at least I can speak for myself. Like, I wonder what it'd be like to be in
I
the
could have been a
mafia or-
gangster.
yeah, I say that
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And I think I'd be a pretty, you know, pretty good gangster, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, so
Putting
that's
a horse
usually.
head in somebody's bed.
But of course, I love horror. You know, and then lastly, I think comedy. You can never
Yeah.
go wrong with comedy.
You can't.
What's your favorite horror franchise?
Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's, you know why? Because there's really nothing extra about it. There's no special effects. It's
Yeah.
really just this man with the mask holding the knife. But just the terror that like.
Oh yeah, I've never even seen those movies because.
You haven't?
Oh no, my threshold for scary movies is like, so I just don't, cause I my imagination just like runs too like I could like if I watched one of those I would not be able to be home alone
That's so funny.
like for years, months, like ever.
You know what I got into recently? I haven't done it in a while, but was watching like scary stories on YouTube, like, you know, through your earphone.
Oh yeah,
And like falling asleep to it. Which
Yeah.
I'm sure most people, that's the last thing they want to do, especially at night
yeah.
when everyone's asleep.
I would have such aggressive nightmares every night.
Do
like
you?
yeah, like I don't know
I
what
don't.
I'm weird. I don't know what my problem is, but
No, I think
do you
that's-
like horror films? Some, yeah.
Like, what's your favorite?
Yeah.
Well, I like Hereditary because it's like
Hereditary.
spooky and like creepy, but it's a really cool, like well done shot.
Is that like a new movie?
Yeah, like came like in 2018.
Is it like on Netflix or something like that?
I think so.
That I can add
Or,
to,
like,
to the
Amazon
list
Prime.
again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Add it to your list.
What'd
Yeah.
you think? It's not a horror film, but what'd you think of Get Out?
I think it was great.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the best horror movies aren't necessarily the most like gory. I think it's just the way you tell a story that like it gets you hooked,
The
and you're literally
suspense.
on the edge because you're like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? Because I remember when I saw that movie, the way it ended, I didn't foresee that. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't have expected that.
Yeah.
You know, obviously as it progressed, like you realize like, oh, this is a crazy family, and you know the stuff that's going on. But like I said, when you really step away and you see the video and you analyze it, like there's really, you know, there's no mask, there's no person walking with knives or
Right.
a machete or anything like
Yeah.
that. It's just,
It's so good.
yeah.
Well, and Jordan Peele, like, I mean, he came from comedy, from
That's surprising, man.
Mad TV and Key and Peele, and he's hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
Key and
funny.
Peele. You watch
Yeah, I
that?
watched
Biscuits
definitely
and
in high
gravy.
school.
I could watch Key and Peele
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
all day long.
So many of our like internal jokes are Key and Peele.
Are they?
Oh yeah. Like I don't think a week passes without one of us saying biscuits and gravy. And
Marshawn
AA
Lynch.
Ron.
You know
Did
who's
you-
another
Yeah.
one too that I think definitely surprised. Well, for me, I don't know about you guys. He's married to Emily. Is it Rhodes? The
I don't know.
British.
Oh, Emily
actress?
Blunt.
Emily Blunt.
John Krasinski.
Yeah, the one that was in The
Yeah.
Office.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
That
I love
movie,
him.
The Quiet Place.
That was a great movie.
I did not
because-
see that. Too
yeah.
scary for me.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, it's
No.
great.
That
No.
was so good.
But the fact that he comes from like a comedian sort of
Yeah.
like background
Yeah.
and movies and The Office,
Yeah.
I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
They
This
made a
is-
second one, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I,
Is
and
it
it,
haven't
is
seen
it a
it?
prequel
I haven't seen
or
it.
is it?
it's not kind of yet.
It's not out yet.
Oh, it
it's
hasn't
not
come out yet?
Like he's not in it, right?
He's in the beginning.
He's in the beginning. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Have you seen The Skeleton Key? It's old. It has like Kate Hudson. It's good.
I don't think I've seen it.
You maybe you missed it, but it's like that's about as scary as I can.
Sorry,
go.
I burped, guys.
So we can
all
still be
good.
friends.
All right,
It's
cool.
cool.
I try to be silent.
But yeah, have you seen The Skeleton
No,
Key?
I've not.
We should watch it this weekend. It's good, like suspenseful, just like good story.
Is it?
I think it's shot in New Orleans. So
Good
just
setting.
like beautiful. It's cool.
So did
It's a
you
good
you
one.
must like The Sopranos?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny. I actually never saw Sopranos completely until post-transplant because we were obviously, in the location near the hospital, and so they had like a theater room. They had
Oh, cool.
all these like VHS, which I had not seen in like many years because it went from DVDs to Blu-rays,
Right.
and then eventually everyone just
Streaming everything.
and so they literally had Star Wars VHS, all these other movies. Like I said,
That's cool.
I grew up obviously. It had The Sopranos. I'm like, let me see if it's complete. And it was complete. And I binged maybe until like season 3. Because then after that, the doctor ended up saying, hey, you guys can go home. So I've still yet to finish the whole season.
Yeah.
But it's great.
Yeah, that's one. It's on my list that I have not watched.
Really?
Like,
haven't
and
I
really
think you
gotten-
should.
I know,
think
I
we
need to.
started it, but we started it like too late at night. We both fell asleep.
Yeah, well, actually, just the other day, I don't know if I was on a YouTube hole or where I was at, and I saw a scene where I don't even know the characters, their names, who they are, but he goes in to like buy some cannolis, and the kid behind the counter is like ignoring him, and he comes back and shoots him in the foot.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hilarious.
There's a lot of inaccuracies when you think of like just the portrayal of the mafia live, but it doesn't take away from it being a great show.
Yeah.
Just the script and the writing. But I still recommend it, man. Like I
Is
said,
it? It was on HBO.
Yeah.
Is that where it was? Have you watched that one?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and he died, right? James Gandolfini.
yeah, a few years ago.
She was young. Yeah.
No more Sopranos after that. You know what? No,
Sopranos.
I actually heard that that there's going to be like the writer from Sopranos, and I think it was like the Goodfellas.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember his name, but he's pretty infamous when it comes to like the mafia genre. That they're working on some script. I don't know if it's going to be like a continuation of the Sopranos, or just these two figures who are going to come together and probably make
wow.
another mafia
That's
story tell. So
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
Did you watch Game of Thrones?
No.
No. Yeah, I can see that's kind of a click out of your.
I tried it, like a little snippet here and there, but I'm the kind of person where I wait for someone else to watch a season and then let me know what they think
Yeah.
before I invest these
Well,
hours.
Yeah, and Game of Thrones is like you're in a committed relationship with that show because there's so many characters
I heard.
that if you're not like really committed to watching the show, like
I felt like I had to study before
I
I
was
watched
gonna say,
every
yeah,
episode.
you were always like, who is this person? Like, what
Like,
is
what's
their
his name again?
What's going on?
Everybody talked about it, and I just
Yeah,
Well, because you would go like 4 or 5 episodes without a storyline being picked up again, right? So like, and then all of a sudden the story, like, oh yeah, what about those
yeah.
people?
You're like, where
and
is that idiot?
I mean, I
then?"
loved it. It was great.
did you? So you
I,
actually finished the whole.
Yeah,
I loved it. It was great,
watched
but
the
it
whole
it,
thing.
it felt like work at times.
How
for
many
me.
seasons is there? Like 8?
7 or 8. Yeah,
Whoa, that's lots.
it's a commitment, and like I said, like you really have to be. It is not a show that you can like watch while you're doing something else. Like it's like a fully like
You have to be committed.
invested, yeah, or you will have no idea. Did you watch We've talked about Game of Thrones. You
Yeah.
watched Game of Thrones, yeah.
My all-time favorite series though is Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
How many times have you watched Breaking Bad, Mark Menezes?
4.
Yeah.
4? I've watched it 3 times.
Have you?
Yeah, my friend got me into that. He actually had the DVD set,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Hey, you have to watch this." And I was like, "What is it?" He's like, "Just watch it." And I'm the kind of person like when I get hooked into something, like I try to stop because you still have to like eat and
Right,
sleep
like
and stuff like that.
work, it's so dumb.
But I can't. Like I get so just consumed. And yeah, through the years I've watched it like 3 times.
The amazing thing about
good.
Breaking Bad is that they do such a great job of just like enveloping you into the world.
Yeah.
Like I think that Breaking Bad maybe does the best job of any show I've ever seen of just like you're able to be, because it's not like Game of Thrones where it's like so not plausible. It's plausible.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a lot of like inside
Jokes.
from
I'm Skinny
inside
Pete,
things.
yo.
Yeah, like we don't go a week without one of us saying, "I'm Skinny Pete, yo." I don't think that's even what he said. We like went back and watched
doesn't-
it,
he doesn't
and we're
say
like
yo.
misquoting it.
He doesn't
but
say
it's
yo.
fine. That's what
It
we
sounds.
say.
Well,
That's
one
what
of,
we say.
That's
and
one of
it's
those
funny.
things. You know those things where it's like, there's one in Star Wars like where he says like, "Luke, I'm your father."
Yeah.
But like where
It's just
you remember it different.
like a classic line.
Yeah. I think he just says, "I'm Skinny Pete," but he doesn't say yo.
Speaking of
It's
Star
funny.
Wars, because I know you're a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, I will not say anything bad about Star Wars.
No, but what do you
in this
think of the
room."
new prequels?
Episode 1 was terrible. So for me, episode 1 was. So I was born in 75. The first
Okay.
one came out in 77.
Oh,
So
77.
I was
Okay.
too young for the first 2 for Star Wars and Empire, but like I remember Return of the Jedi. Like it was a big deal. And by the time it had come out, I had already had all the toys and the action figures. So I was a huge Star Wars fan growing up. And then fast forward, episode 1 comes out. I think I'm in my early 20s.
Okay.
So it was a big deal. It's like,
Of course.
and so me and my brothers are a few years younger. They were in high school. I was in my early 20s, and we went and camped out over in Mission Grove. That theater was brand new on Riverside. And we camped out when the tickets were going on pre-sale. We went like the day before, stayed all day, stayed the night in a tent, like out in front of the movie. And there was probably a couple hundred people out there.
That's insane.
We're like playing Monopoly, and it was fun. And then the movie came out maybe a week later. So then we stayed the night again because there weren't assigned seats back then. So that's how much excited we were, right? So 2 different times
Right.
camping out at night, and came out of the movie, and it was terrible.
You think so?
Yeah, episode 1. I was just
Is episode 1 the one with Jar Jar Binks?
yeah.
Yeah.
It was just there's a documentary called The People versus George Lucas, which is hilarious. Actually, there's a comedian too that talked about. He's about my age, and he
Okay.
goes into a whole bit
Spiel.
about. He compares he compares it to episode 1. He's like, it's kind of like when you were a kid and you had an older uncle that like did something bad to you, inappropriate. That's what episode 1 was. He goes, and then episode 2 comes out. It's like next Christmas. So it's like Christmas, and your uncle like exposed himself to you or something bad, right? He's like, that was episode 1. He's like, and it's your favorite uncle. It's George Lucas, like your favorite uncle. And
Right.
you're like, so now it's next Christmas, and you're thinking, you know what? He must have been drunk. Like he would
Probably
never do
something.
that again. Like,
It was an anomaly.
yeah, that's not gonna happen. Episode 2 comes out. He's like, and he whips it out again. Like that
That's
was
funny.
episode 2.
I guess because I'm from a different generation, so I appreciate the trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, even just the film industry, and the special effects are so different.
Yeah.
So when I look at the trilogy, although I respect it and appreciate it, then you see episode 1 and just for one, the duel, which was the first time you actually saw something more combative.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as far as the prequels, what about the recent ones now? Like, what do you think of those?
They were a lot better.
You think so?
Yeah. Now looking back, like and rewatching them, I can appreciate episode 1. I still can't stand Jar Jar Binks. I think he ruined the movie, but I can still appreciate it. Episode 2 and 3, I think the biggest problems I have are was Hayden Christensen, who played Anakin. Is that his name?
Yeah.
I thought it was just terrible.
Why?
Terrible
I don't
actor.
get that. I don't get that.
You liked him?
I mean, I didn't think he was bad.
Yeah, I don't know that I would
Especially
say he was
episode 3.
terrible.
I felt like
I need to go back.
I mean, he
and
sounded
watch.
bratty, of course, and a little annoying at times and with the scenes. But
yeah.
I mean, he turned into Darth Vader. Obviously, he's not that great of a person.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Well, I guess. I still prefer the prequels over the new movies, to be honest.
Did you?
Yeah.
They're very different. It's so hard to compare them. I feel like
Yeah.
they're very different movies.
Well,
And I
and the
just-
most recent ones, I feel like I'm having a hard time tracking because I'm like, wait, where does this fit? Like, are we now like? Because then there was like the Han Solo movie, and they had like 2
That was
different kind of
garbage.
like story. Don't get our kids started. Like that. I think it was that movie that prompted our 19-year-old to refer to the Star Wars franchise as a dumpster fire
Oh, wow.
and say that he was refusing to ever go to a movie again. But yeah, I feel like I need some space from the whole thing, and then like to just like circle back
Yeah.
to it.
The biggest problem I had with the most recent ones was what they did to Luke Skywalker. I feel like
Yeah.
the
What a
Luke
horrible way to
the
just,
Luke that I know, like that
No.
wasn't that character.
I agree.
That's the biggest problem I have. I can go back and watch the prequels and appreciate them now. I think a lot of it for me at the time was just, I mean, I don't think any movie could have met my 23-year-old expectations of growing up with Star
Well,
Wars at
That's
the
what I was
time.
going to
Yeah.
say with going back to the prequels, that I think that because it had been such a huge long
Yeah.
stretch since we had seen anything, and just the like technology difference, like it was such a radically different
For sure.
feel and look and everything. So I think that no matter what it was with that first round of kind of like new movies, we were going to hate it.
Yeah. Well, in the CGI, I mean, for me, I look at even Yoda, like in the original movies versus CGI Yoda. I personally I prefer the non-CGI.
You do?
And that's probably just because that's what I was used to. That was my first experience, you know. So in a lot of ways, I think it was really impossible. People like me that grew up with it as a kid, the original ones, really it was impossible to please us.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There would be nothing, which is why I think if there's an element of like circling back and looking at it like in its like totality, to just like be able to appreciate it better.
No, I get it.
Yeah, but they were. What's your favorite one?
Probably Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Just because it was epic,
Mm-hmm.
and like you said, it was. I mean, still for me to like realize like, oh, he turns into Darth Vader, just from a storytelling point of view too.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I can really appreciate,
Yeah.
you know, the progression, and it just caught me off guard. You know, the new ones, they're cool to watch, but you won't catch me really going out of my way to. I watch them just to say I watch them.
Right.
Yeah.
And more so to be a critic, like, oh, I didn't like this and that.
Right.
Yeah, like if I'm circling back, if I'm gonna like sit down and watch Star Wars, like I'm either gonna watch Return of the Jedi or Empire Strikes Back. Like I'm not gonna probably be wasting time.
I think I'm
rewatching the
you
others.
watching the prequels.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I can see
where
that.
it's cool, and obviously the special effects and all that are way superb,
Mhm.
and it's a well done movie, but it just doesn't do it to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's really nothing where I go out of my way to sit down again and watch it for almost 3 hours.
Well, it's like SNL. Like they say, whoever the cast was while you were in high school, you think that was the best cast.
Oh yeah,
ever.
like Will Ferrell
I was
and
gonna say Will
Sherry
Ferrell.
O'Terry,
Yeah.
like funniest.
Yeah.
And like I mean, I could argue all day that is the best era of Saturday
think
Night
so.
Live ever.
I
Like
think
Molly
just the cast in
Shannon,
general.
David Spade.
Jimmy Fallon, Tina Fey,
Chris
like,
Farley.
yeah,
No,
that
I
whole
think
like
it was
run
really
from,
great.
like, yeah.
And even after that, like I have yet to see an SNL cast that's like really that.
I
you
have
know?
yet to see an
Yeah.
episode of SNL that I'm laughing at
Yeah.
more than like one sketch.
But you know what, too, though? I think taking into consideration what's going on, people become very sensitive. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's like changed the landscape.
Oh yeah. Have you
Especially with
heard?
SNL.
Have you heard Steve Carell say like everybody wants like an office reunion, and he's like, we couldn't make that show today. Like
No, everybody
we
gets
were
so
so
offended.
insensitive. Like we
Yeah.
could not like diversity day. Like couldn't happen. Like would not be happening.
Yeah, I totally feel you on that. So,
Sad.
So what year did you have your transplant?
I almost forgot for a second. 2019.
2019.
2019, yeah.
Last April, right?
Last April,
Yeah.
25th.
Yeah.
On my parents' 20-something anniversary.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah, the
That's
odds,
cool.
right? So, yeah, a year and 4 months, I think.
Okay.
Or going a year and 4 months.
And
how-
can you feel like a radical difference? Does like
Yeah.
as you're like taking breath, you can feel a
Yeah.
radical difference.
Yeah. No, it's a day and night, literally.
Yeah.
Like even the day that, you know, after surgery when they like extubated me, although painful, just again the fact I was able to take a deep breath
Yeah.
was like insane
Wow.
because I had never experienced that. And I guess at some point, you know, you become optimistic, but you also adapt to your situation, you know? So my best was obviously when I was shortly after a course of IV antibiotics, you know, after my discharge, or while I was going through a tune-up, you know, when you're in the hospital. You can even feel the difference from before you go in until
Right.
while you're in the hospital and as you recover. And so I grew up knowing that feeling and like, yo, this feels really, really great.
Right.
You know, and then when you get discharged, you know, that first 2 weeks or so forth, you can still carry, you know, that feeling of like, oh, I can breathe better and
Yeah.
I feel great. But then there's that slight progression.
Well, because
So-
it's like physically clear.
Yeah,
Right. They're
yeah.
like physically removing all of
Exactly.
the mucus and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when I took my first deep breath, like that scared me because I've never experienced the full capacity.
Yeah.
And it's even hard to explain because, you know, people who are born with healthy lungs, like you don't really, unless you go through something or you're affected by a specific, you know, issue, whether or an organ, and then you can kind of like understand, you know. I'm not saying you guys can, but
No, but yeah.
you know. And so when I finally was able to take a deep breath, I was like, wow, like, so this is what it's like to really breathe, you know.
Yeah.
And again, that space was unknown to me. So for a second, I was like, oh, maybe it feels almost like your lungs drop, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
So it freaked me out. But that's when my doctor was like, no, that's your first deep breath.
This is a normal,
Yeah.
Wow.
normal breath.
So it feels so good. And like
That's
now,
awesome.
like I want to be able to talk to you guys, even if I had oxygen.
Yeah.
I'd probably say, hey, we probably have to cut it soon because 5 minutes into, you know, the
Yeah,
podcast,
you could feel.
I'd be out of breath.
Yeah.
Even with full capacity of oxygen, you know, going through. It just got to that point where it was only maintaining me, you know, but that was it.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to do any more than that. So it's a whole different just life,
Yeah.
you know, in general.
And how long, like, what was that process when you knew you needed to have it, you were waiting for it? Like, how long was that?
It was 14 months. Yeah. You know,
And how many times did you go in
3.
thinking that you were going to get them?
2. And
Two
the third
times,
was,
yeah,
you
the
know,
third.
as they say,
It
third
was
time's a charm.
third time the charm.
And
Yeah.
the first two, it just like wasn't a good match.
So
or-
the first one, you know, you get excited because it's the first call. And the part of you thinks like, oh, this is it.
Right.
And I didn't realize up until that point that, hey, you know, we're still dealing with a situation where, you know, it's never really set. That's when I experienced, like I said, my first dry run. And they didn't tell me that until after the fact.
Yeah.
Because their whole thing too is we don't want to, you know, although it's really your decision, but we don't want to say too much where you kind of make up your mind. You're like, oh, I don't want to go through this.
Yeah.
Not that they would, again, flag you for it. But at the end of the day, you know, we're trying to maximize your options, you know? And so if we tell you right off the bat that, hey, there's a chance that this may not be the case for you, you kind of start to, like, mentally prepare yourself. And you almost, like, sort of, like, isolate yourself from situation.
Yeah.
And so they kept it from me until the next morning when we're like, okay, well, we're not really getting any, like, news or update.
Yeah.
And that's when they said, hey, it went with this other person.
Oh.
So obviously you were second in line
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
in case something happened to them, you know, and it kind of falls back to you.
Yeah.
And if there's some issue with you, if we called you up, it'd go to the next person,
Yeah.
you know, behind you. And so
Well,
that's
because
how
I'm
it
sure
was.
it's super time sensitive.
Yeah.
Where they like the lungs get there and everybody needs to be prepped, ready to go.
And you know
Oh,
what's so funny? When I
devastating.
finally got the call, a part of me at that point, although I'm very optimistic, I was like, okay, well, the reality is I'm just not going to know, you know? And I'm not even going to get too excited or get so alarmed by it because it may very well be the same situation. So when they called me for the third time, I'll be honest. I remember I was talking to Abby. I was like, you know, I know it's my choice. And I don't know if I actually want to go through this whole,
Yeah.
you know, getting worked up. And although you try not to get excited, you still get excited, you know, drive to San Diego and then find
a
out
huge
that it's
deal,
not,
yeah.
you know. And then I also had a listing appointment, which is going to be like my biggest like listing appointment,
Yeah.
you know, like a 600 plus house. And so I was like, you know, like the odds that this doesn't turn out to be, like I just lost this like great
Yeah.
opportunity. And, you know, I remember just like for a second, a very stupid decision for that moment. Well, not a decision because I didn't make it, but just a very stupid thought.
Right.
That you know, maybe I should just, but obviously, you know, that didn't happen. But I had some doubts though. Aside from the real estate appointment, the listing appointment, just, I didn't, for a moment, I didn't want to go through that again.
It's a
to be honest.
huge thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so do they have you prioritized coming in? Like they know this is our first, second, third, or they're just looking who's the best?
No,
match?
so, you know, like I said, usually they're gonna call you, you know, and you don't really realize until you're there, you know. Then that's when they kind of break it down. Like, okay, if you're first in line, then you're first in line, and they tell you right off the bat.
And that's based off of
Of-
need and match.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like I said, you know, when you go through the transplant process, you know, you obviously go through all these like procedures and testing. Then your case gets presented to the board, and so the board discusses, you know, are you a good case?
Yeah.
What are your odds? Are you sick enough where you obviously need a transplant, but are you not too sick where
Right. You're not going to
it's
recover.
going to be fatal? Yeah, and you won't recover. And so, in addition to that, a lot of their decisions are also based on like you yourself, like how mentally prepared are you?
Yeah.
You know, because it is a life or death matter.
Yeah.
So they don't want to deal with somebody who's going to be, a foot in, foot out, because the next person may not be a foot in,
Right.
foot out. They may be in all the way. And so you're doing a disservice, and it's very selfish if you don't really prioritize it, because the next person is really, I mean, if you're hanging on, but the next person doesn't have that luxury, that weighs heavy.
Yeah.
And so they want to make sure that we're not going to put you in a position where you feel forced, because it is a big decision. But we also want you to be conscious and aware of the fact that if you're not in 100%,
Yeah.
please relay that.
Let somebody else
and
go.
let the next person who
Yeah.
really deserves it and is in dire need. And so that has a lot to do with their decision,
Yeah.
So when they finally make a decision, they put you on the national board. And so based on like your testing and where you're at currently, they'll score you.
Yeah.
Obviously the closer you are to 100, that means that you're like really, really in
Yeah.
need. When they first scored me, I was at a 34 point something.
Oh, wow.
So on paper though, I was my respiratory, my lung function was super low.
Yeah.
On record, like I said, I looked like I was pretty ill.
Yeah.
But then in person, when you see me physically, it's a whole different,
Yeah.
scenario. But from the moment that I got listed to 14 months later, even the progression, I was like, wow. I didn't realize that until after transplant. Because
Yeah.
at that moment, you're like living day to day, and this is your normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you know that you get sick, and then you recover, and you bounce back, and then it happens again, the next 3-4 months. But it got to a point where, my recovery wasn't fast, and it wasn't, like it was before.
Yeah.
And so that's when I realized, like, hey, I don't have the luxury of time anymore.
Yeah.
But again, these realizations didn't come until after transplant.
Yeah.
I still thought that while I was listed that I can still pull through and hang on. But now in retrospect, I think I was near like my end.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was all good timing.
I am thankful that I am not in charge of making any of those decisions, because that
It's a
sounds
big decision.
heart-wrenching
Yeah.
for the people that are
Yeah.
ranking that. Just,
How long after did you have that realization of where you actually were?
Not too long ago, to be honest with you.
Really?
Yeah, because I've talked with Abby, and there's times where we've had like honest conversations, and I had to even be honest with myself, And I think sometimes the realization doesn't happen right away, because there's a part of you that feels like it could be interpreted as like weakness,
Yeah.
And regardless, nobody wants to ever come across as weak, But I had to like really come to grips and realize that like that's not it,
Right.
But the reality is that I was very, very sick. And you also get used to, being sick in your own way, but it becomes like your normal. It's part of your lifestyle.
Yeah.
And you know that you always bounce back, And I always did. So I always kind of saw it through as, eventually when my time comes, I'll be, much older. I never realized that, at 24, I'd be literally at the end of my rope.
Yeah.
But again, in retrospect, at 24, I didn't think that. I just thought like, hey, I'm sick and I really need this transplant. But
Yeah.
I've gone through 2 dry runs where I can probably afford a few more.
Right.
Don't look forward to it, but
Yeah.
we'll see it through.
What would
now.
you like going through that realization? Obviously, something I can't even understand. Like, what does that do for you now? Like in your mindset, your outlook, and like, how does that affect you?
It more so. I mean, I've always been pretty, like, real fast. Do you mind if I use the restroom?
No, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just 'cause
Yeah.
I've
We'll
been
take a
holding-
break. And we'll come
Okay.
right back. You're talking about going through that realization of where you physically were before, and like now being on the other side of it and realizing that like what has that done for your outlook? And I'm sure it's something you're still processing.
Yeah, I think I am. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I've always considered myself to be a very like honest and I see life from a realistic point of view. Like, I'm optimistic, but I'm not naive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think it was just something that for a while I was trying to suppress, you know, because again, I kind of like interpret that as like weakness. And I've always, the way I was raised and the way I've grown, you know, I had to assume a lot of responsibilities aside from like CF, you know, like my parents, and it wasn't really like a good relationship. So that added more to the issue,
Yeah.
you know. And then you add, like I said, my brother passing away and my cousin passing away, both from CF. So just the way I was raised, I kind of like learned to always like suppress my emotions. Like, I talk about my emotions, but I never really show. You know, it's one thing to talk about an emotion, and it's one thing to like feel the emotion and kind of, you know, let it like drive its course. And I just learned to just talk about things and suppress things. And so I don't know why, for a while, it just was something that I just couldn't come to grips, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe because you know your time is coming and you know it's inevitable. And you always want to say that, you know, I've prepared myself or I'm okay and this and that. But I think the honest truth is I still wanted to live, you know, regardless of how ready I was or how at peace I was with myself and God. It's like, you know, I'm 24. Like, I shouldn't have to be in a situation, but I am, you know, and it is what it is. And so I think when you experience something and you know, have this moment where you really kind of give perspective, then that realization comes. It's not something easy, you know, or at least it wasn't easy for me to like really like swallow.
It's not an easy thing.
Or to even talk about. And I don't know why in my head I was interpreting that as like weakness, you know? And I think it all kind of like is tied with the way I was raised, the way I learned to kind of like deal with certain things, you know? And the moment you acknowledge something, it now becomes, you know, like a present, you know, a current manifestation, so to speak.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, you know, people don't know how to like come to grips with that or handle that situation. And I think it's just this reality that they also want to avoid, because there's always this like assumption with certain things, you know. And I guess it also has to do with the grieving aspect, you know. Like, I was just having a conversation with Abby the other day. I was like, I don't think I've yet to grieve my brother, or my cousin for that matter, but my brother, you know, we live together. And so I think that's just kind of something that I don't think, you know, I'll ever really understand the realization or why it took me this long to like figure it out.
I mean, I think that there's an element of just like survival, you know, like I think that we're all, especially during this pandemic, surviving. But for you, like, it's like so much like more real and physical and this visceral, just like survival that, you know, like I think that our bodies and our brains are programmed to like, I can't deal with that right now. And so I'm just going to like kind of put it to the side while I power through and survive this thing. And
I think another reason too why it's probably difficult is because like I remember even when I told Abby, you know, because that obviously has been a pretty, you know, realization, like a big realization for anybody who goes through like a terminal disease, but especially like even with CF, where you're fine and then next thing you know you get a cold, and that cold becomes like your last cold, you know, but you always hope that that's not the case.
Right.
And I actually saw that, you know, like in live, in person, with my brother, with my cousin. Mind you, my cousin was a little bit more ill, but that doesn't take away from the fact that her passing was still very shocking.
Yeah.
Now my brother's, that just surprised everybody, you know.
He was younger than you?
Yeah, he was 15. You know, he was just a freshman. And it was our normal routine, you know. You go in through a tune-up, you do your course of antibiotics, then you get discharged, and you carry on healthy for the next 2-3 months until it's time for you to go again.
Yeah.
And it happened with him, you know, very soon. And then he went to the hospital 2-3 weeks. He got discharged, and then he went back home. And that happened 9 times up until September. So literally each month he was in
Wow.
the hospital, and each time it became he was less at home and more in the hospital.
Yeah.
But even when he passed away, I remember, like, I talked to the doctor. I was like, just be honest. Like, what is,
Yeah.
what's the case? What's going on? And it's like, to be honest, like, the infection is obviously very difficult to kind of contain. We're doing our best, but, with CF2, you're exposed to so much antibiotic that your body naturally builds like
Right.
a resistance. And so what may be effective to me will not be effective to him, and vice versa. And so at that point, they're trying everything, to on a high degree, but it's not responding,
Right.
And so we got to a point where I was just like, I even hated asking the question, but I had to ask. I think for
Yeah.
my own, like, selfish peace of mind,
Yeah.
like, is he going to die? And if
Yeah.
so, like, what's the case,
Yeah.
How long? He's like, honestly, I don't know. It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a year, it could be 2 years. Or he can simply wake up tomorrow and feel better.
Right.
But as of right now, we're dealing with the matter at hand. We're not thinking about tomorrow, we're thinking of now. And so when he finally passed away, like I said, it took everybody by surprise. And, you add the fact that me and him would always have honest conversations about, like, death.
Yeah.
You know, and if something were to happen, how would we want to, make our way out? And so transplant, although the alternative for every person who has CF, but anybody in general who has to deal with, the fact that, hey, this is something that you have to, make a decision on. We were okay with just kind of making our way out just as we came in, because there is risk with transplant, and it's
Yeah.
not a guarantee. And that was always our state of mind. Then you end up meeting somebody who you really care for, and that transplant is still the last thing,
Yeah.
but then reality hits. You start to get sick more often than you normally do. And it kind of brought me back to my brother,
Yeah.
And I know that sometimes me and Abby probably wouldn't talk about it, with that sort of, like, honesty. I mean, we both probably felt it, but it was just something that we probably both tried to avoid, especially me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I can handle death and, the reality. I feel much better than maybe someone who's not as exposed,
Right.
or who death is probably, or just the subject of death isn't really something that people, normally tend to kind
I
of.
think you've probably just grown up with a completely, like, different life expectation
exactly.
than the rest of us.
Literally and figuratively, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so when they got to that point, this fear actually kicked in, because up until that point, like, I had no fear.
Yeah.
Like I said, I want to live. Don't get me wrong, but if it's my time, it's my time.
Right.
And I want to kind of go in my own terms. No alternatives, no.
Right.
You know,
Heroic measures.
Yeah, it's
or-
just
yeah.
it is what it is, and you make the best of it. But like I said, when that happened, that fear kicked in right away. I was like, I'm with someone who I truly love,
Yeah.
and it's too soon for, for her to
Right.
be left alone, and for me to make my way out this way.
Yeah.
And again, you always hope that when it's your time to go, that it's in the most smooth and,
Yeah.
visually, nice.
Yeah.
way.
Humane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I said, I saw my brother and my cousin, the way they made their exit, and it wasn't a pretty sight,
Yeah.
And I didn't want her to be exposed to that.
Yeah.
And so that fear then came in, the fear of, I don't want to go this early,
Yeah.
because I have a life to live. I want to go with her, I want our lives
Yeah.
together to just unravel. I don't know what's the future, but
Yeah.
I sure as hell don't want this to be it,
Yeah.
So I think the whole realization too, it has to do with this fear that I felt, which I still deal with. You know what I mean? And that's why I don't think, there's anything specifically about it, because I'm still dealing with it. But it does allow me to be even more honest, because this is probably something that most people who are going through this situation are going to feel.
Yeah.
You know, for some people, imminent death is it's just a reality, you know, because of the situation. But for others, you know, who are similar to me, you know, they still try to hold on, you know,
Yeah.
and they always hope that, you know, this has obviously hurt me and it's dragged me down, but I'm going to, you know, rise. And sometimes, you know, that isn't the case, you know.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, I was able to not only rise, but like my life has changed completely, you know, 360.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's allowed me to become more honest with myself and like, you know, that certain things, although you may interpret it as a weakness or, you know, this negative like connotation, it really isn't, because like we talked earlier, you know, a lot of people may be feeling this way, you know, it's your expression and you're allowing that expression to, you know, it's going to be something that the other person is going to relate to, you know, and sometimes it allows that person to realize like, hey, I'm not in this, you know, by myself, you know, there's other people who've gone through what I have. And so if through this I can help others,
Yeah.
you know, I think it serves a purpose. But yeah, the realization, I don't have a direct answer to that, you know, because I think I'm still going through it, you know.
Yeah.
So I have yet to even come to grips to just the idea that, and I think honestly it's probably just because I don't want to face the fact that I was dying. Like,
Yeah.
just to be honest with you, it's just that. You
Well,
know?
and there's so much, you have so much other stuff to process, you know, like
Yeah.
you have almost a decade of, you know, pain to process before you can even really get to the immediate
Yeah.
stuff to process. And grief is not linear, you know, like as much as we would all like to be like, I'm going to get on this like moving walkway of grief and it's going to take me to my destination. That's just not the way that it works. That
Yeah,
it's
it's
very
overwhelming.
much like,
Yeah.
you know, you're over here, then you're over here,
Yeah.
and you're making progress forward, and then you go back, and
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and I think that although I'm happy, you know, that I'm where I am now, it's not an easy road. You know,
Yeah.
it's not an easy road up to transplant, but it surely isn't easy even after transplant. And I know most people would say, oh, well, you've had your transplant. Yeah, my quality of life is better,
yeah,
but there's still a lot of emotions that you suppress through the course.
yeah,
you know,
just to survive,
while you're
literally
going,
survive.
and even after, because your body and your mind is adapting to your new life, you
Yeah.
know, and it doesn't allow you to properly, you know, deal with some things because you're so busy living life, you know.
Yeah,
But I think that we have to kind of go through this whole course, you know, and for some people it's linear, like you said, and for some people it's not, you
Yeah.
know. And I think for me it's definitely not the linear point.
I don't think it's linear for
You know,
anybody. Yeah,
I think I have my moments where I'm super happy, you know, and I'm grateful. And there's times where I'm just like, man, you know, I hate
this
it too.
sucks.
Because I wish that, you know, my brother would still be alive, or that my
Yeah.
cousin would have had the same opportunity, you know, or that they weren't as sick, quote unquote, where they weren't even eligible for transplant
Right.
because the odds for them just weren't the same as they were for me, you know. And so I think it's this guilt that you also carry on,
Yeah, I
that
can
you
see
deal
that.
with, but I don't think you can truly ever get over, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Well, it seems like you've had so many different angles to look at it, where we don't get that opportunity, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
to see it from so many angles. Where for you, I mean, you were faced with you being that close to it, and then faced with two people that you loved, and so that experienced the same thing,
Mhm.
right? So for you to experience your brother and your cousin, you have that same thing, so you're experiencing all that. So it's like that's one camera angle, and then
Yeah.
you have another camera angle of you're experiencing it for yourself, you know, that first one, and then the second one as that's someone that you love, and then now you have another camera angle of looking at it like with your wife and
Mhm.
Abby and what you experienced on that side and what she's experienced. So it's, I can see how there's been so many different lenses and
Yeah.
angles at it that you've seen all of them,
Mhm.
where people just typically don't have that. That's just a lot to process and a lot to
And I
deal
think the
with.
other thing too is, like I said, I'm grateful, and my quality of life is so different and better in
Right.
all aspects. But it doesn't guarantee, you know.
right.
I still deal with a new threat, which is my own body trying to fight against,
Right.
this great opportunity. So it's an irony in itself, because, before it was just this disease that was slowly killing me, and I was dealing with just one sort of aspect, whereas now it's sort of everything, working against me, and it's one thing if you're dealing with like an outer issue,
Right.
but when it's literally within you,
Yeah.
you
When you're literally attacking yourself.
exactly, and like I said, I take it day by day, and I'm still human, I think if you're ever going to be a great advocate for any issue, you have to also be transparent and honest.
Yeah.
And I don't ever try to come across like I'm this like superb like transplantee or
Yeah.
patient.
Like
you know?
everything's great. I had
No,
the transplant. My life is perfect.
Or that I'm not at fault. There's still have been things that I could have made a better decision even post transplant. But I think only someone who's gone through this sort of situation can understand.
Yeah.
Because from someone outside looking in, it's like, well, how could you do this? Or why didn't you think this through? And I think that we're also innate creatures. Sometimes we just do things
Yeah.
out of impulse or it's just ingrained, and you don't think of, the consequences all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's also this sense of you just want to have this normality. But then again, the realization is I'm normal compared to
Yeah.
my life prior, but I'm not normal like the average person,
Yeah.
Because the average person still doesn't have to worry about, if you don't take these meds, at this time, your body's going to obviously kick into this different gear,
Yeah.
which can be detrimental to,
Yeah.
And so I think that's why probably I still deal with that realization because it's our realization from a past experience, but I'm dealing with my current realization,
Right.
which is allowing me the opportunity to live a better life and a more fulfilled life, but it doesn't guarantee me, anything.
Yeah.
It's more a moment in time that I'm going to make the best out of it while I can, because, I mean, I can still follow things to a T, and you can't go against nature,
Well, and we could walk out and get hit
Yeah,
by a bus.
and that's the
you
other
know,
thing, too.
like, yeah, there's nothing is
So
guaranteed.
I just, all I can say is I'm grateful. I enjoy my life. I never really thought that I'd get to this position
Yeah.
because I was so opposed transplant anyways growing up. But, sometimes circumstances in your life put you in a position where what you thought was, one thing can very well change tomorrow,
Yeah.
And so that happened for me. And I'm here because I was able to not only adapt, but also see this opportunity, that was presented. And sometimes we also get enwrapped in our own heads
Yeah.
of, well, I'm going to go out my way, and I'm going to make a bang.
Yeah.
And I think people interpret that as if I don't, then I'm weak. And again, it kind of falls back to this like weak sort of, perception that people carry. But of course, I'm speaking from my own experiences and I would much rather be looked as a weak person than to allow my own ego of what I consider,
Right.
it to be. Because if it wasn't for that, then I'd probably be dead, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be here talking to you guys
Yeah.
about.
Well, and I love that it was your love for Abby
Mhm.
that kind of like completely transformed your opinion and your mindset, and that's why you're here.
Yeah.
Like it's really your love for Abby and wanting that.
Listen, I love
Life
my
with
mom.
her.
I do. And I know that the love between a mother and a son is unique in its own way. And it's not for it to come across a certain way, but I was still okay,
Right.
for me to.
She's not your partner.
Yeah,
I think that there's
exactly.
something to be said for like a partnership
Yeah,
between two people.
the experiences. And like I said, it was her who really, and it wasn't like right off the back because
Right.
like I said, we were together for a few years before that even happened. And my health although not great even then, was still normal, for me to maintain.
Yeah.
But it was again this fear, not so much of dying, but of dying prematurely.
Yeah.
And not, it's one thing if you're with someone for 20 years and you at least experience these 20 years with this person.
Yeah.
And you build something together, and it's never like you ever want to, die before Mark, or Mark wants to die before you. It's
right.
You always would much rather die together, you know?
We say we're going to go out like they do in the Notebook, where they like get in the bed and die together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, I'm like, this is too soon for me,
Yeah.
Like, we have yet to really establish ourselves in so many different areas in our life, personally, individually. Then you add just our careers, homes, kids, and so forth.
Yeah.
And so that fear of losing her was far more than dying, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's when my perception changed too. That's when I actually feared death at that point. Because up until that point, I didn't fear death. Like I said, we all die, and it's inevitable. And you can do what you want with it, and you can try to manipulate the circumstances, but eventually it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But I would much rather, fear the thought of losing Abby and not seeing her again than dying in general.
Yeah.
And so that's when it all changed for me too. That's when it led me to really make the decision, like, hey.
It's such an amazing story.
Thanks.
You have such an amazing story.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for sharing it with us.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Best what I can.
So much. How did you guys meet?
Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah, my second job.
Oh, really?
It's so funny because one of my best friends, he was like, hey, Staters is hiring. I was like, okay, cool. I was like, oh, well, good luck. He's like, no, come with me. I was like, I don't have any formal attire,
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'll let you borrow my shirt. I remember he's taller than me. He's like 6'2". And the shirt was obviously big. I barely had any, like, formal, slacks. So anyways, we made our way. I think we got to, like, at 5:40 because the lines were already huge. And I didn't really have a resume, to be honest. The jobs I did prior to that were more like, with my dad or, just family. And it was all under the table. So there was no actual resume that I can put on paper. I did this. So I didn't go in thinking anything of it. I obviously made an impression with my, my boss, obviously. And he hired me. But it was my same friend who, when I left Staters, he was like, hey, Amazon is hiring. And at that point, I was like, oh, well, again, good luck. I just wasn't.
Yeah.
Not that I don't have a work ethic. I just didn't, And so, ironically enough, I got the job and he didn't, because he also didn't get the job at Staters. And so it was to that, persuasion from him that led to me, meeting Abby. And I remember we met in orientation. She thinks it's creepy, but I'm pretty observant. I was on the wall and she was on the opposing wall and she was sitting down. And so, again, I'm very observant, and, sometimes people just make an impression, whether you realize it or not. And she made an impression.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, obviously, the irony, obviously. And so that was that. I then saw her in orientation because we all ran to the main building, and then that's when they all told us, like, no, you're in the wrong side. Yeah. So it was me, her, and another girl who ended up becoming her best friend in Amazon. And say hi, whatever. And we both went on different groups. And then it was peak season. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with peak season. Like, for most warehouses, it's obviously like the Christmas time.
Yeah.
Where work just kind of kicks into gear.
Or quarantine.
Yeah.
Time.
Exactly. And she had 2 jobs, so she couldn't work the day shift. And I couldn't work the day shift either. And the only option was, night shift or graveyard. And so we both got it. And because we were still working on a brand new building, we were the first group, there wasn't a lot of people. So our group was probably only 4 people. And because we knew each other, because we remembered each other, we kind of stuck together. And at that point, the workload wasn't as immense. So when we went into work, there was really nothing for us to do. So we got paid to just get to know each other, to be honest, because we would just walk around the building talking and talking and talking. And so that's what led a friendship. And in that friendship, obviously, oh, I like you and you like me and so forth. and it all happened so fast, you know. But it all started on Amazon.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. It's, I mean, when we met her, obviously we met you, and then meeting her, it's obvious you guys are just a perfect fit.
Yeah. We're very opposite, which is ironic sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
Because we're like,
It makes them more exciting.
it does.
Yeah.
I'll
It's
just
the
say that.
parts that were very different that are so amazing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Makes it exciting and fun. It'd be so boring.
It
if
would
we
be
liked all-
super so boring.
Yeah. No, like I said, there's times where our mindsets or our perspectives or the way we see things are so different. And then, when you just talk about like our likes and dislikes, they couldn't be any different. Like, it's one thing to be opposite, but usually there's some form of like commonality.
Yeah.
Not with us. Like, we're so different, you
Yeah.
know? But it works. I mean,
Well,
7 years.
you're both willing to move into an RV, and
Yeah.
that's a big deal.
Yeah.
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 Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Have you guys started, because you had a YouTube channel, right?
Yeah.
You're going to document this.
We're
Have you
actually
started documenting it already, or?
We stopped vlogging for a while, and so I think at one point she couldn't find the little disc, the memory.
Yeah.
And so then I couldn't find the batteries. So I remember I started recording with my phone. I'm like, she's an editor. I'm
Yeah.
just the one who kind of takes control sometimes of like the vlogs per se. And so I'm like, well, I can just record. But at this point, we haven't really done much, to even record. I mean,
Yeah.
we found the camera or the memory chip and the battery. But tomorrow, a guy's actually coming to tear down the sink and the closet. Because I don't know if I told you that we're just going to convert that into a bedroom
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that tomorrow can be the beginning of this, like, sort of
I'm here
vlog,
for it.
just the whole transformation.
I'm
What's your
excited.
YouTube channel?
The Navarette life.
What is it?
The Navarette life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just your last name.
Just my last name.
Nice.
The Navarette life, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, man. I mean, when we first met and just hearing a little bit of your story, just very inspiring on a personal level for us,
Thanks,
obviously.
man.
So and now being able to get to know you more and build a friendship. We look forward to watching, what you're going to do in real estate
I appreciate that.
as well. And
I'm looking forward to it too.
what you're going to do with the RV and all that. So
I'm excited
there's
to
a lot
see
to come.
Theodore again.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you so
Cutest.
much for sharing your
No,
story.
thanks, man. I know I said it before and I'll say it again. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
This is really big for me. Just this experience, talking to you guys, never would have thought that this would be the case, So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
thankful.
More to come.
I appreciate that.
All right,
I'm
thanks,
looking
man.
forward. Thanks.